Or the Germans?
Leipzig.
I don't blame you. I went to school in this country, but
Well,
If you don't hurry up,
I was thinking about football last night, and he thinks that.
You don't read Lipschitz.
we're on. Okay, come right. Okay. We have to that film with that third line from the top, fourth line from the top, basically. We're discussing Shetufim Mavois. Shetufim Mavois have a few Mavois want to join together. The way you join together is with food. The Mevi and the Vitzvah both point out that a lot of these halachas apply equally to Ruvi Chatzos as to Shetufim Mavois, and into that's how we pass them. We're just discussing how to get the food to belong to everybody. If you remember yesterday, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? What did Rabbi Yehuda say? How do you make everybody be kind of it? You pick it up a tefach. Says the Gemara Meisvei. Fourth line from the top, the last line in the word, the last word on the line. He said, how do you make a shit of a voice? We're being the chovish shel yain, big a barrel of wine, shel shemen, or of oil, shel timon, or of dates, shel gurgos, or figs, shel shaman appears any other kind of fruit. If it's your own tzorich lezakus, then you have to be mezakeh to them. You have to get permission. Let's say, for example, you own a barrel of fruit. Let's say we all live together in one mob, and I want to make a shit of my voice, and you all gave me food to store. And now I want to make a shit of my voice. I have to ask you permission. Why do I have to ask you permission?
you have a chilek.
It belongs to them, and more than that, if you do not allow anybody to eat your food, there's no shituf. If you look in Rashi, it's the second line. What? And the second line. No, that is in the case where I provide the food. Alternatively, where you gave me the food for the sake of shutting my voice. Sometimes it is possible that you all left food in my barrel for a different reason. Let's say, for example, for business purposes, or other purposes. And now I say, let's make a shut of my voice together. I have to ask permission. Do you remember somebody?
Yes,
Very good. What did Abai say? I don't want to make.
Give an Eiruvin because if they ask him for the food, he couldn't afford it.
Very good. And they did. And why didn't he go collecting for it?
Embarrassed. Yeah.
Embarrassed. It was too busy learning. It's not frozen. Now it just got me on very small, but it doesn't matter. May say anyway. You heard this that you can't see it. I know, but afterwards it goes. So yeah, I guess.
It needs to be on YouTube.
Oh, right now it's fine. It's fine. Says the Gemara. Says the Bais weiter. You lift it up from the ground. What would you say the next word should be? What's the Bais say? Mashu. Is a word not like a Yehuda. My mashu now the Gemara tefach. A mashu is a tefach. Meaning sometimes the word mashu, which means a minimal amount, means a tefach. Itva. Now here you need to hold track. Hold couple. It's geshmak if you hold track. Shitufim a voice. A shitufim a voice. Rav amayim tzorich lezakos. Shmuel amayim tzorich lezakos. That means even if it belongs to you, according to Rav, you do not need to make a ma'aser kinyan. Let's say, for example, we all live together, and I pick up a bottle of wine. I do not need to make a ma'aser kinyan, but it works without a ma'aser kinyan. V'shmuel amayim argues tzorich lezakos. You do need to. A Ruvei Tchumin comes to Ruvei Tchumin. What's a Ruvei Tchumin? If you remember, if you want to walk for 4,000 amos, you have to put some food down. Now, what's very unique over here is that they're arguing in the opposite shittas in two different places. That means sometimes you have machliks in one case. Here, they each argue backwards from the other in a different shitta. For example, Rav says that regarding shitta of voice, you don't need to do a schus, and the Gabi shitta of Ruvei you do. And Shmuel says Gabi Ruvei you don't, and the Gabi Ruvei says you do. So they're holding exactly the opposite of each other in two different cases. And therefore, we need to understand the logic. And it's interesting, the Gemara doesn't explain. So we have the first taste of the page, and taste brings a little bit from Rashi and his own explanations. If you want to hold track, it's good to hold track a little bit. Let's explain first Rav's Shitta. Rav's Shitta says that Mavoi, you don't need to, Eruvin Tchumen, you do need to. That logic is quite easy to understand and explain to you. We'll say like this. What does Eruvin Tchumen work as? A Ruvei Tchumen, is it an individual thing or a group thing? Individual. Because let's for example, I take bread for myself, it works for me, not for you. Huh? So therefore, Rav says, how can a Ruvei Tchumen work without being mezaked? If I take a piece of bread, which is mine, and now what the new bench should be able to work for that. How in the world is ever going to work? So Rav says it comes to Ruvitchum, of course, you have to be Mazaka. Mashekid by Shitufim a voice, you don't. Why not? It says Tosfos in Rav's logic that if I do not give it to all the people in my Mavui, so then none of us can carry, because I can't carry. It's a communal issue. So therefore, I want that everybody should be allowed to enjoy it. Because if not for the fact that everybody can eat from this bread, then nobody will be able to carry it, me including. Helping them help you. Very good. Very good. And therefore, because of that, even if I'm not mizakeh, even if I don't actually give it over to you, since I want to be able to carry myself, therefore. So that's Rav. Shmuel, Tosfos goes to, if you want to memorize it, Tosfos goes through 3 different mahalchim in Shittas Shmuel. Now, Shmuel says the exact opposite. By Ruvei Tchumin, you do not need to be mezakeh. By Ruvei B'chatzes, you do. So now, Tosfos goes 3 different swords. If you remember, we once said one logic is like this, simple logic with Balabatish. Ruvei Tchumin, you're only allowed to do for a mitzvah. Shitufim a voice of B'chatzes, you're allowed to do for any reason. If you just want to be able to play football, carry the ball across. So therefore, he says the Gabi Ruvei Tchumin, since it's only for a mitzvah, there were makel that you do not need to be mezakeh. Actually, the Ruvei Chatzevos, which can be done for any reason, there were machmir that you have to be mezakeh, you have to give it to one person. Another malach this is like this. A Ruvei Tchumin, do you need to ask permission? Ruvei Tchumin, you do. Of course, think about Ruvei Tchumin. If I don't ask you permission, I make the Eiruvin of 2,000 amos to your east, you won't be able to work anywhere to your west. So Ruvei Tchumin, you do. A Ruvei Chatzevos, you don't need to ask permission. Why not? Because you don't lose anything out of it. You only benefit. Ruvei Tchumin, wherever you get in one direction, you lose another. Ruvei Chatzevos is not like that. So therefore, no one loses. So therefore, he says like this: a Ruvei Tchumin, where it's not an advantage. So therefore, you have to ask permission. Since you have to ask permission, you don't need to do a Ma'aser Zechir because you already asked permission. Once you ask permission, it's not necessary to do a Ma'aser Zechir. It's not. It's not. There's a difference between asking permission and a Ma'aser Zechir. Permission, I say to you, do you want it? Ma'aser Zechir is when I'm actually makne to you that belongs to you. Since you do not need to ask permission, therefore you do need to be makne. It's quite complicated. And let me just finish up the third logic of Tosfos. The third logic of Tosfos is like this: that Eruv Chatzevos works because of the fact that the food makes us joint ownership, joint as if we're all guests by each other. Ruvei Tchumin works only as B'koina Shavisa, only for the fact that this food represents where you're living. So for the Gabi, representing where you live, you don't need to do Ma'aser Kinyan. Because of the fact that I said this is your food and it's there, it's as if you're Koina Shavisa. Actually, the Ruvei Chatzevos, which works as a Ma'aser Kinyan, because at the end of the day, we want to be all living together, so you do have to be Ma'aser. Again, what's important to remember, Rav and Shmuel have an argument. Do you need to be makna or not to be makna? We actually should be paskin, but you always do need to. So if you ask me, for example, will you take some bread and put the 2,000 amos away? I have to be makna in it, right? It's important halacha to remember that makna is a real thing. You can't change your mind. Well, I mean, somebody was once asking that what happened was somebody said to say they were giving out in the cost shop boxes of matzahs for free after Pesach because they didn't manage to sell them. So what happened was somebody said to somebody, will you pick up a few boxes for me? After he picked up a few boxes, somebody else said to him, do you mind doing me a favor? I want the boxes. And the second person who asked him, he felt much closer to. The second person was his brother. The first person was just a friend. Can he give it now to his brother?
Depends when the kinyan.
Depends
when the change of ownership takes place.
So right, so Ma'aser Kinyan, if you did a Ma'aser, if you picked it up for that person, it's too late. You can't. Ma'aser Kinyan, it doesn't belong to you anymore. You can't change your mind and give it to somebody else. Ma'aser Kinyan is not the same as a shus. Ma'aser Kinyan, it belongs to my proper Ma'aser Kinyan. Well, it's not yours. Right. Again, so it's important to have let's do the more inside once more. Again.
It's not.
Okay, Ma'aser Kinyan. It's Ma'aser Kinyan. It's Shituf Mavois of a mind circle zakas, Shulach with circle zakas. We would have a circle zakas, Shulach and circle zakas. Bishlim and Shmuel Shmuel is very good. Why? Because now Mishnah it says clearly you have to do a Ma'aser Kinyan, and now Mishnah talks about Ruvei Chatzevos. And the Mishnah later, which was over with Chumin, doesn't talk about doing a Kinyan. So Shmuel is brilliant. And Rav Maitama, how does Rav cope with it? At the end of the day, he's arguing with the Mishnah. Well, says Tanoi, we have a Machlikas Tanoim, so therefore Rav is not concerned that the Mishnah doesn't say like him, it's Machlikas Tanoim. The daughter of Aboishia, she went to a bathhouse. And the bathhouse was more than 2,000 amos away from town. Can you imagine? She went to a bathhouse. It was more than 2,000 amos away. And Shabbos came in. So can she come home for Shabbos? Well, without Erev Tchumen, she can't. She can't come home. She can't come home. So the mother-in-law said, I'll make you an Erev Tchumen. Bechia said she can't come home for Shabbos. You from Bovel. He was mocking of him. Are you still machmin Eiruvin? Kach Omar Abba, kol sheyesh techa lehokim be'Eiruvin hokim. Whenever you have a question in Eiruvin, always be makel. We had the following shaila. Mishal chamois irvolo. The mother-in-law provided the food for the Ruvei Tchumen, and the shaila was because she never gave it to her daughter-in-law. She used her own food. She used her daughter-in-law's food, was without permission. So the question is over here, was it that it was the daughter-in-law's food without her permission, or was it the mother-in-law's food without being mazakit? It never even belonged to the daughter-in-law, it just belonged to the mother-in-law. And regarding that question, there was a machlokas whether the Eruv worked. So you had an Eruv Techumin, which was a machlokas whether it worked, and we were discussing Eruv Techumin of food which never belonged to the daughter-in-law. Is a raya to Rav. Rav says by Ruvei Tchumen, you do need to be mezakeh, by Ruvei Chatzeres you don't. And if he's not bothered about the fact that the Mishnah says not like that. Only Abzeh, now the Gemara just repeats what we just said, only with another person speaking about it. Only Abzeh, Rabbi Yaakov, great Bas Yaakov. Abzeh said to Rabbi Yaakov, the son of Bas Yaakov. If you look in the Rashi, great Bas Yaakov, Oviv lo haya hogon, v'ficha lo yiskivo. It says the son of the daughter of Yaakov. That's a very complicated way of giving somebody zichus. The son, Yaakov, was a grandson of Yaakov. Missing out the father's name. Why miss out the father's name? Because he wasn't a good person, so if he doesn't deserve to be mentioned. The say that there brings that any person that's mentioned in Gemara, any Moira was mentioned in Gemara, had the ability to do Tchias HaMesim. So therefore this person was not so special. He didn't have that capability, so it's not mentioned. Okay. Kimot is Hossam. When you get to Eretz Yisrael, what? Yeah, it means any Amoyer with his father's name. Amoyer with his zichus. Kimot is Hossam. When you get to Eretz Yisrael, Akif, go around the Zil Sulma de Tzur, go up to the town of Tzur. Tzur was on a very high mountain, so you had to climb up a cliff. So they call it like a ladder of Tzur. And go and ask Yaakov Ba'iti what the story was. He asked him, was it the mother-in-law's food? It was the mother-in-law's food. She was never mezakeh, and it's a machlokas whether it works or not. Okay. So the Ma'aseh, so far we had the machlokas regarding Ruvei Chatzeres and Ruvei Tchumen, machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Omar Nachman Noktinon, we paskin, Echod Ruvei Tchumen, ve'echod Ruvei Chatzeres, ve'echod Shitufei Mavois, Tzorech Lezakos. In all these cases, you do have to do a Ma'aseh Kinyan. Boyam Nachman Ruvei Tavshilin, Tzorech Lezakos and Tzorech Lezakos. It's important to halacha is that Erev Tavshilin, if you go Yom Tov before Shabbos, you want to be able to prepare for Yom Tov for Shabbos, you have to take an Erev Tavshilin before Yom Tov. So the halacha actually, that if a person forgets, what does he do? What if a person forgot to make Erev Tavshilin? Lie on the vovs. Very good. How many times can you lie on the vovs? No.
In an entire lifetime, huh? Is that
Limited. Once a person done it twice, it's considered a prishea. You can't rely on the vov ever. So now, the question. No, the Mishmur says once he's done it, missed it twice, it's a right that he's.
Because you were in hospital.
I don't know the halacha. That's off right. So tzorech lezakos, tzorech lezakos. Does the law have to do a ma'aseh kinyan for the kehillah or not? Omar Yosef u'may tiboyle. What was the question for Nachman? No, but is it necessary for him to?
Sorry.
It says chus. Yes.
So then why do you need to ask him?
No, it's a difference between asking and doing a ma'aseh kinyan. We're not discussing whether you have to ask something. You don't need to ask because it's chus. Question is, does the Rav actually have to do a ma'aseh kinyan? Does he need to pick it up and tell somebody to pick it up for the rest of the kehillah? What's the shaila? Omar Shmuel Uruvi Tavshilin Soich Lezakis. You do need to be Mezaka. Omalei Abaye Pshita Delo Shmialei. He never heard it. The Shmialei, if he did hear it, Baiti Boile. What's the shaila? Omalei Otu V'Techumin Milei Omar Shmuel Soich Lezakis. Omar Yud Soich Lezakis. He said, look at this. This is only a technical question in who said what. Meaning, when Nachman asked the question, do you need to be Mezaka or not? Came along Abaya, and Abaya said, of course, he never heard the statement that of Yosef that you do need to, because had he heard that statement, he wouldn't have asked the Shaila. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? Rav Nachman himself heard the statement from Shmuel that you don't need to be Mezaka by Ruvet Chumin, and nevertheless he says that you do have to. So you see, the fact that he heard the statement does not necessarily preclude the fact that he could still ask a Shaila and not be sure. Shmuel says no. You can't compare. He heard the machlikas, he decided to be machmi like both. Had he heard the statement, he wouldn't have argued because there's nobody arguing. The maskana is that you do need to be mezaka both Ruvet Tavshilin, Ruvet Chatzel, Shutufim Avois, and Ruvet Chumin. In all these cases, if you want it to work, you actually have to do a ma'asakin. It's not enough to ask permission, Moshe. You actually have to get somebody to pick it up, and you can't pick it up yourself. You have to get somebody else to pick it up and to be zoichet for the person that you want it to work for. Now we're going on to a slightly new topic. Ahu Turzina. Turzina was a guard, and he was a goy. Davish Vusidu Abzeh was the neighbor of Abzeh, and he owned a property. What's the halacha if a goy owns a property? You have to rent from Omulei, Oigel on the Shusach. Rent for his property. Lo Oigelu refused. Also, Kabid Abzeo, Omulei Maule, make him with the Bisu. Can we go to his wife and rent from his wife? Omalu Ochim Mishlokish Mishmei Gav Rabbi. He said the name of a great person. Umanu, who is this great person? Bchanina. Ishe Shel Odom Ma'areves Shlemidato. You can rely on his wife without asking him. Oh, we'll come to it maybe more in a minute.
She's got some ownership of the house.
That's right. She has some sort of ownership. Right. The question is, Ishtuk Gufo is a servant, you could say, has a different rishus. Here, Ishtuk Gufo, it could be that she's part of it. Okay, we'll see. Oh. Okay. Let's see more right. The Radik tells us a story which is almost the identical story. It says like this. Another story, there was this guard. He was in the neighborhood of Yehuda Barisha. Omulei oigelom nushusech. Red tells your property. Lo oigelu. Also kaved of Yehuda Barisha. Walu malu make it with the biscuit coming out from his wife. Lo have a biday. He never knew. Also kaved of master. Lo have a biday. He also never knew. Also kaved of Yehuda. They came back. Went to have Yehuda. Omalu ochma shmol ishte shel odem ma'areves shlemidato. You can do an Eruv without permission. You can do an Eruv without permission. You can get a woman to do an Eruv. Now this has two halachic ramifications. One is that by a Geisha woman, you can rent from the wife without asking the husband. That is one halachic ramification. But another halachic ramification, by Yiddish man, if a woman says, here's the bread for the Eruv, you do not need to ask the husband. Oh, very good. So it's regarding a Geisha person, it's for rental. Regarding a Yiddish person, it's for Eruv. Meisvei, noshim shiur woman shtat for shlemidas ba'alen. Ain't a woman Eiruvin shituf on shituf. We have a price that says clearly that what? That a wife can't do an Eiruvin, can't do a shituf without the husband. Lo kasha, well, it's not a kasha. Hoda osa, hoda lo osa. When this person who doesn't join in makes the entire mori forbidden from carrying, then you do not need to ask permission. The wife's good enough. But when he doesn't forbid, then you need to have the husband's permission.
When you really need it.
That's right, Clara. Very good.
If that guy doesn't be rishus,
Yes.
I agree the wife can threaten you, but if he doesn't let them, she doesn't know how to get through that.
Right. So if you look at this,
He
says
him first and said no, he's obviously with a block on it. That doesn't work.
right. Let me look at this. We're not discussing the rice dictum. We're discussing to Rabbanan the Chazal wanted to have episakin. That's how Schira and Nikita works. The shaila was, what did Chazal require to make it okay? How much did they require? Was there enough for a woman or not? So the Gemara says over here, when it's needed, the Chazal will make her that's only thing you can rely. Now, when is it possible for a person to be part of an Eruv and not Asa? Does anybody remember? and not asa. How can a person be part of the Eruv, but that if he doesn't join in, he does not forbid? When can you have such a case where a person is part of an Eruv, but he doesn't asa? Do you remember? You don't remember this?
If he's not there,
On the inside, no. The inside we had sweet.
if he's not in
bad.
town, no.
No, not if he's not in town. I'm trying to remember where the picture is. What?
The one with the 3 for 0 now.
Yeah, there's 3 houses in a row and he's in the middle.
That's right. That's 3 houses. No.
Because
Oh,
there's 2, those 2, he made it.
if you got a picture of your test, even if you don't have the picture, you have like this. Here it is. You've got one cul-de-sac and another cul-de-sac, and a house in the middle. So the people on one cul-de-sac can carry without him. The people on the other cul-de-sac carry without him. If he joins in, you'll be allowed to carry from his house as well, but not because he's needed. That is the case. Where he's on the side of a cul-de-sac, right? Let's say you've got let's say a road like King's Road, right? Right. Imagine King's Road, and you've got roads like Mowbray and York Road, Fort, York Avenue, Fort Avenue, these roads, 4 roads. So now these roads, if they want to join Kings, they can. If they don't join Kings, then the Kings can still carry if they make an effort themselves. So let's say somebody lives on York and he wants to join in. That is the question over here. Says the Gemara weiter. Hochedam mistabet im King. Kasha the Shmuel the Shmuel have Kasha against Shmuel himself. Thomas Shmuel ech nun Mov Shmuel gelichtat von Mov wurde nicht tatef. Ne, Mov nicht noch sich bisschen in Tisch von mir about koch. If he's used to, and he doesn't join in 1 week, we can go against his wish and just help ourselves. And you see that only if he's used to, mashma, if he doesn't want, you can't, even with his wife. Shema Mino is a raya that there's a chiluk between when we need him and when we don't need him. When we need him, then we can do it without his permission, just with his wife's permission. When we don't need him, then we can only do it with his permission. Let's try and prove it. The halacha is that there are certain halachas that when you live in a neighborhood, you have to pay for. For example, if the neighborhood has a guard, and let's say you move into a new town, they pay for a guard. Can you insist for a new person who moves into the neighborhood that he has to pay for the guard? That's a Gemara Bava Basra. It's very interesting halachas. I remember, because maybe people awake, but it was a very painful thing. So he told me like this, that they have a shared water system on the roof for Tut Shemesh. And he said a new neighbor moved in, and that day, the water mains burst on the roof. So everybody had to join in 300 shekel. So he said that his job was things. He knocked on the person. Welcome to our new building. It's nice to meet you. Could I have 300 shekel?
It's like someone living on the ground floor and have to pay for the lift as well. That sort of idea. If he didn't have it easier.
So he does have to.
Oh, he does, I'm saying, but
That's
the
yes.
same thing.
So the halacha is that if you live in a movel, you have to pay for the lechi and the kur. What is a lechi? And a kur is a beam. You have to pay towards it.
We should all pay for the Eiruvin.
That's right.
We do. You're supposed to. If you want paying for it, you can't use it.
No, you don't get the
No.
tax. You
It's
don't
not
get
a half,
the
it's the
No, I'm
rules.
saying they can't, it's not.
I'm curious.
Should you be forced to?
Look at the map.
Now they're supposed to pay for that, but not always, so.
You have £5, they give you a tax for £5. You pay £5 a month. It's a very well funded area, apparently.
I hear tell you, I don't know why nobody has yet advertised this Gemara that you have to pay for the. Maybe I think what the difference is. Maybe a town in a mobile is different. A small mobile, you mechuyev. A big town, maybe not. Maybe I'm not mechuyev to make it over the whole town. No. The Gemara not saying because you're moving, using it. The Gemara saying because there's a neighborly chiyuv, not because you're using it. Says Gemara, no, you can't compare that halacha to paying for the food. There's a difference between paying for the lechi and the kira, and a difference between paying for the food. Why? Top of pair with base top line. Shani also the lechi mechitzas. Without the lechi and kira, you don't have a wall, and you need the wall for safety. That means you can't compare contributing food, which Shmuel says you're not mechuyev to contribute, but the lechi and kira you are mechuyev to contribute. All those shouldn't get very disturbed. I thought one of you would ask it. Obviously, how much safety is there going to be in a post or a beam? No, in a post doesn't need to be farmers. It's only by you're right, by passive bivoisas, but not
It's
here.
a reminder.
A reminder, but not to carry on Shabbos, but that's not going to give you more safety. Look at Tesis. Look at Rashi, top Rashi.
Who said it is safety?
Look at top Rashi. Shana also give me so Mobi Begulu, when you know Shema, you remember to guard it. Hilkach Kay for those say. I will have to be tilted to provide the food to allow you to carry. We don't die again. When it comes to providing food, that's make it mutter to carry. You need my permission. And if I don't want, maybe I don't have to contribute. But the lechi and the kira, that's for the safety of the town, the safety of the mobi. Fake tasteless.
Shouldn't mean safety, it should mean that makes the wall, that makes the.
So then what's the difference between that and the food? There's no difference according to you.
No, because without that you won't have anything.
What do you mean?
The food
Without the food, you also can't carry. There's no halachic difference between no food and no lechi.
What does taste comes up?
The tasteless doesn't like it. Because
Because how much safety is it giving you?
yes, that's it. He says like this, that when it comes to the lechi and the kira, it is intrinsically makes it into a permissible model. Food works because when my food is in your house, it's as if I'm in the host by you. When you take my food against my wish, and I say I don't want to provide the food, how is it going to work? At the end of the day, so you've got a slice of bread of mine, which is in your house, but I never wanted that slice of bread to be used, so there's no way that I accept. I just pay for that beam, so then it works. And that's what the Gemara says, the difference between lechi and kira, which works as a wall. If I contribute for a wall, it is a wall. If I contribute for food, you can't say that it's my food is by you and therefore we're all living together. We're not. The biggest proof is I didn't even want to give you my food. If you've got a slice of bread of mine in your house, it doesn't make it when I'm a guest of yours. Only when I put the bread for my own das. Lishna achina mitzad shani. It's one very interesting Gemara here. This Gemara, all the praise can say, does not have any understanding whatsoever. Nobody understood what this Gemara meant. And because of that, some people deleted it. And you have many explanations what this Gemara means. The Gaon will just do what the Gaon writes. If you look in the Gaon, he changes the Gilsa from Mitzad to Beistin. It's slightly quite similar if you think about the Rosh Hashanah and everything. That in Beistin you're allowed to take, but not individually. It's a new halacha. Once you get going. You can use an Asheva tree for a lechi. What's an Asheva tree? And what do you have to do to it? Destroy it. You can even make a beam asher. Of course, a lechi. Why? The halacha is a kira has to have a minimum size. What's the minimum size of a kira? No. Very good. It has to be. And how wide is that? No, it's a tefach. Because you can balance it on the middle. The brick is 3 tefachim. It's right at the beginning. So one tefach, a tiny bit more than a tefach. So if you use an asheva, which is supposed to destroy, where is it? For example, in Gabi Sukkah, you had it. Then you can't use a lulav from asheva. Why can't you use a lulav from asheva? Because since it needs to be destroyed, there's not just left to destroy it. So you might have thought it doesn't work. Mashenkin by lechi, there's no share. You can have it a millimeter wide. That's good enough. So therefore, the chiddush is, and why it doesn't work? Because it's Chazal never got disturbed by it. It means you're allowed to use an asheva tree, and it's not like your lulav and your esrog.
When using it as a wall
To where?
to carry between the two chaseros. You said you can't use an asher there, can you?
There we said because of the problem is that it's since you can't. The Gemara left us machlokas. But the Gemara says you can't because you can't get that noise. You can't climb up it. It's not considered you've got access to one to the other.
Why is it different here?
Here it's just a simon hecker. It's just a reminder. Yeah. Okay, now you have to have enough food. What happens if the food goes down? All the Rishonim point out, not Rashi, but other Rishonim, that we're talking about the food became less before Shabbos. Because if the food became less on Shabbos, let's say mice ate the bread on Shabbos, we don't care. It's only if it's Nisma'at before Shabbos. Moisef umezaka v'entzorech lo'idiyah, you can add your food, you don't need to let them know. The Tosfos then, if more people moved into the mob, let's say more people moved in, then Moisef umezaka, you can add your own food, v'entzorech lo'idiyah, you have to let them know. Rashi says a very interesting shot in these 4 words. Rashi like this. Moisef you add umezaka is talking about when if you're providing your own food, you don't need to ask permission. You just add food and you mezaka. But if you're using somebody else's food, you're using their food which they left in your house, you have to ask permission. Come on, Shiur. How much food do you have to have? Oh, how much food do you have to have for a neighbor? There's mentioned Merubin, if there's a lot of people in town, they won't discuss how much is a lot. Muslim states this, they could have enough food for 2 meals. How much is a meal? How much is a whole meal? So if it's 3 eggs or 4 eggs. Right? An egg is approximately, what is it about? It's a bit less than this. I think it's about 80 million. It's about 300 grams of bread, or between 300 and 400 grams of bread. So how much is a loaf of bread now? Does anybody know? Is it a kilo, 750 grams? 750 grams it is. I think it's 750. That's I can't remember like that. So a loaf of bread would be enough for 2 meals. So 1 loaf of bread would be enough for the whole of Manchester. Right? If it's less than that, if it's only a bit, a fig for every person. Every person has to provide a fig. Yes, it would be. How much is a box of matzahs? It's a kilo usually, though. Oh, that's not so much. Usually more than that. It's 2 boxes of matzahs, maybe. Okay. When you first set up making the Eiruvin, if you already set up an Eiruvin, but weeks later it went down, even less. When you've already got a shit of voice, that means all the mavos joined together. And now you just need a bit of bread for the Ruvei Chatzeros. And for that, says Rabbi Yossi, it doesn't matter if it went down, even if it went down before Shabbos. As long as the very first Shabbos there was enough, you don't care if later on the mice came to eat it. And even if there's only a crumb left, it's okay. Why? If there's nothing, it's no good. Why? Because the Iker Takana of Eiruvin was that people should remember the halachos of Eiruvin. Because you've got to perverse already, so it's good enough. You've got it. Okay. Says the Gemara. So Chaval, you'll miss it. You'll miss the Gemara. You won't remember it as well if you're busy with all the things. Okay, here the Gemara is with Daik a little bit. The Mishnah says, the food went down. Mashbad, if the food disappeared, it's no good. Or got eaten. So only if it's gone down, not if it's disappeared. But that means what happened was you had, let's say, apples from everybody. And you decided that it went down, 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 and you want to add some more apples. So you're adding the same kind of food. No, we're talking about where it happened before Shabbos, you do it before Shabbos. In this why talk about a case where it went down? We'll see in the price that even if all the apples were finished, it's good enough. They all provided apples, and now you're providing oranges. Even if it just went down a bit, you can't use oranges. Why? If all the finished food was finished from one type, you don't need to let them know, and you could just add from the same food. Base minim, but from 2 minim, you do have to let them know. So the Gemara says, the Gemara's got 2 explanations pshat in our Mishnah. We'll talk about one kind of food. Mine is nismat mate, meaning that the food was finished. Nismayet does not necessarily mean that there's less of. Nismayet can also mean it got consumed. So we're talking about the Mishnah where all the food got consumed and all the food was finished, and now you're providing new food of the same kind, and it's okay. Let's just get to the second test again. When it's finished, then you do need to ask, and then it's no good. But when it's only a little bit, it's okay to add. Now Rashi explains like this. Rashi explains all these cases we're talking about where you're using their food. There's a complicated case, just try and get it clear. What happens like this? We're all living in one neighborhood. We're all living around one movie, and you're all leaving your fruit and veg in my house for whatever reason, not to do with Marvel. Just because, for example, maybe my house is the biggest, so you decide to leave your apples and oranges in my house. I say to you one Friday afternoon, let's make an Eruv together. What should we use? Well, you've all left apples in my house. You left 5 apples, you left 5 apples, you left 5 apples. Between all of us, there's enough apples. Let's make an Eruv together. He said, fine. A few weeks later, I noticed the apples have gone down. Nice to eat them all, or somebody ate. So now, says Rashi like this: if I provide my own apples, I don't need to ask anybody. Even if I provide my own oranges, I also need to ask anybody, because what are you losing out of it? You've agreed to make an Eruv in the past, and I'm providing my own food. We're talking about where I am not providing my own food, but rather I'm using other food which you've got. And then, if I'm using other apples which you've left in my house, then even if it got completely finished, the first set of apples, I can use a whole new set of apples of yours. Why? Because you agreed to the apples in the first place. I did it to ask permission, and I can use the apples which is yours but stored in my house. If If we're talking about I don't have more of the apples, I want to use oranges, so then it depends. If the first set was clearly finished, I need to ask permission. If it was just if it is orange, if it's only a little bit to add, then I don't need to. Says the Gemara weiter. The Torah said, "Moshe mezakachulu." Omar Sheis v'Omar Yechis zeh semez chalukin olav chaver v'Rav Yehuda. The Tan. Omar Yehuda v'Med v'Moy be'evut chum v'Chatzeres v'Am v'Das v'Shtei v'Das. Rav Yehuda holds you do not need to ask permission by Ruve Chatzeres. You can do it without permission. Now we always have this very big yesod in Shas that when Rav Yehuda says v'Med v'Oim amoim v'Machloikes hamoim, what does he mean? Is he arguing or is he explaining? Let's get it clear. The Talmud said in the halacha. The Talmud said that you have to ask somebody's permission before you make an Eruv Tchumen. Are you hearing the words of Talmud? You have to ask somebody's permission before you make Eruv Tchumen. Says Rabbi Yehuda, "Bamed v'ma'amorim." When did the Talmud speak? Only about Eruv Tchumen. Eruv Chatzeres, you don't need to. Is Rabbi Yehuda argue with the Tanakama? He said the Tanakama held you always need to ask permission, and I'm saying no, by Eruv Chatzeres you don't. Or is Rabbi Yehuda explaining the Tanakama? That's Machlokes. Perhaps just the word for Moim means explaining, but not necessarily. He could be saying, that is, I agree with you half. Right. He could be saying, says Machlokes. Says the Gemara over here that from our Mishnah it says Muchach that Rabbi Yehuda is arguing. Why? Because in our Mishnah it says, you do need to ask permission. And there Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need to ask permission. There's a raya from our Mishnah that you do need to ask permission. Says the Gemara. Again, this land. It's before the mission to argue. What do you need to tell us? That is it between two mavois, like we explained earlier. Where without them, we could manage quite perfectly on our own. So then, you need to ask permission. But in a chotzer which is in one mavoi, where without them there will be no mavoi altogether, no shutuf voice. You don't need to ask permission. Kamash malon. The chiddush is that even in one mavoi you have to ask permission, meaning that even in a case where without these people you will have no eruv whatsoever, you still need to ask permission. It says what is considered a lot of people? By a lot of people, how much do you need to have for the whole town? 2 meals. 2 meals. We said a meal is either 3 eggs or 4 eggs. If it's a little bit of people, how much do you have to have? How much do you have to provide? If it's a little bit of people, 1 fig per person. Oh, that's the most question. They got camel more. Oh, 18 people is a lot. Once you've got more than 18 families, so 2 meals is enough. Exactly 18. What about 19? 18 and upwards. Why 18? My father explained to me. That's considered little. That means like this. The etzem naloch is everybody has to provide 1 fig. Once there's 18 people, you've got 18 figs. 18 figs is the exact equivalent to 2 meals, to 6 eggs or 8 eggs. Once you've got 6 or 8 eggs, then you've got enough, and you do not need to have anybody else provide. And that's enough for everybody. What?
What's the logic there?
Yes, 8 families have to do 8 figs. What's the logic? Yeah, the vote's like this. A fig is something which gives a person a certain amount of food. Once you have 2 meals, it's a chashivus. 2 meals is Shabbos, because the Shabbos, every day of Shabbos you have to at least 2 meals. A normal person eats in those days where they eat 2 meals, it's all chashivus. And then no matter for however many it is, says the Gemara, that 2 meals is 18 figs. Now, we said it's a machlokes Rishonim. Mechaber says you should always try and be machmir. That 2 meals is 8 eggs, and some people say it's 6 eggs. So therefore, how much is a fig ratio to an egg? Not so easy to work it out. A fig to an egg. There's 18 figs to 2 meals.
9.
A meal, wait a second, a meal is either 6 eggs or 8. A meal is either 3 eggs or 4 eggs. So 2 meals is either 6 eggs or 8 eggs. So you have to divide 8 eggs by 18. That makes a fig. So a fig is approximately just under half. That means that fig is about 0.4 of an egg. If there's 6 eggs, it's about 0.3. So that is enough. What? Yes, that's the two. Okay. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll start next week for tomorrow. It's going to be like on Friday. We're going to be finishing a pair. We're always in a major rush.
It's always a Friday.
Is the last time was also Friday? Yes.
Yeah, last time
Yeah.
was Shabbos. Last time was Motzei Shabbos.
That's
We were
a
supposed to have pizza.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Tomorrow. What? I'm officially bonus. I'm officially bonus.
Two sweets there for you.
I am officially bonus.